Lana Del Rey, did you know that there's a tunnel under Ocean Boulevard? Album review, let's chat about it. Hey friends, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning here tonight to chat about this latest album from Lana Del Rey. I apologize in advance, this is going to be a long review, but that's what happens when we get long albums. Lana Del Rey, you know her. Come on. She has been a polarizing figure in modern music since her breakout album Born to Die. Unless your name is John from What's Spinning, I've always had a soft spot for her music since day one. And while far from perfect, I do enjoy the album for what it is. The singles like Blue Jeans and the title track and Video Games and Summertime Sadness, I still enjoy for what they are. Even some of the deep cuts I thought were really powerful on this album. However, I will say this, I'm not one to argue about this album. If you don't like it, trust me, I get it. And full disclosure, I've always thought that Ultraviolence was a little bit of a low in her discography. But around the time of Honeymoon, Lana became less of a guilty pleasure for me, and I thought that she really stepped into her own light. The shift in instrumental sounds and the increased great songwriting on this album really had me enamored. And I've always thought that Lust for Life is one of her most consistent albums. It's the real deal. I mean, Love in itself is one of the best tracks she's ever put out for a reason. And also, I mean, this goes without saying, but Norman fucking Rockwell deserves every accolade that it got. It deserves all the hype. It's easily her best album. Now, in 2021, Lana gave us two albums, kind of spaced apart, but she did release two albums that year, the first being Chemtrails Over the Country Club, and I did really enjoy it. I thought she brought her A game. I thought that, God, there were staggering ballads on there, like White Dress. There were also really great deep cuts like Tulsa Jesus Freak, which has become one of my personal favorites. I thought overall she was operating on all cylinders, but later on that year we got Blue Bannisters, and it's a fine album. I mean, there's certainly great moments on there like Arcadia, but for the most part it was the first time in a long time that I kind of felt like I was worried that Lana's style was getting a little stale. At the very least, I enjoyed a lot of the stuff on the album, but I needed her to take the next big leap in her career. And which leads me to this new lengthy album. This thing is 16 tracks long, well over an hour, and leading up to it she dropped a slew of really great singles that made me feel like this was the reinvention that I was kind of hoping for, and for the most part it certainly is. The Grants is a truly great intro. I do love the nods to gospel that we get here and just how soulful this track is. It is classy, and it becomes even more classy as it opens up into a really sweet, very tender piano ballad from Lana. This has all the right things going for it. It's moments like this that make me take a step back with Lana and just think about how far she's come as an artist, as a poet, as a lyricist, as a songwriter, and it's pretty staggering. This track is absolutely gorgeous, and it gets even more gorgeous as it rolls on and these group vocals pop in. And I've always thought that a healthy dose of spirituality, when done right in modern music, makes it come off even classier. This track is no different. It's a great start. Then we get this album's title track, Did You Know That There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard? And honestly, I don't think it gets much better than this. This is my favorite track here. Her vocals are absolutely divine. They are to die for. And the absolutely, God, heartbreakingly real lyrics that we get on this track are nothing short of commendable. She really opened up her heart here. Like, it is so commendable just how vulnerable this track is. A lot of this album, you can tell that Lana really sat with, took her time with, and I think that works this album's, best efforts. It's a tragic ballad, but it absolutely has a home in Lana's discography. It's really powerful. Then we have Sweet, and let me tell you right now, a lot of this album is piano ballads, and if you are not into hearing Lana behind the piano, this album may not be for you. But her sweet vocals, her very powerful lyrics, and the intimate nature of tracks like this make it worth a listen. But there's also like a lot of sounds of hope on this album, and that's not something that I've always been used to hearing in Lana's music, but it's refreshing to hear. And it's tremendous. I love this track. I also love ANW. Now, this track is gathering a lot of buzz for good reason. It is a monster of a tune. It is a sprawling journey that goes way back, kind of tells tales of Lana's past, where she's come from, how she's grown. And for that alone, it is impressive. It's a real journey. But even instrumentally, it's pretty ambitious for her, as it starts out as a folk ballad, but by the end of it has some subtle nods to hip-hop. It's done very classy, though. And yes, it's a long track. It's over 7 minutes long, but I do think it is justified. Candy Necklace featuring Jon Batiste is also really, really well done. There is a drama to this track that I can't get enough of. It's just as quiet as other tracks here, for sure, but it has this quiet intensity that I don't think can be overlooked. It's just as visual, it's just as introspective. Her songwriting continues to be right on the money. There's something so intoxicating about this track, and the very whimsical, more upbeat second portion of this track is scratching all the right itches. And listen, a lot of the tracks on this album push over 5 minutes. There's some meaty cuts on here, but Lana's attention to detail, her songwriting, it makes it all pass very easily. Everything seems to have purpose, or at least most of this album seems to have purpose. And her and Jon Batiste have a lot of great chemistry. I also do really enjoy Jon Batiste's interlude. I mean, compared to the Judah Smith interlude, which we will certainly get to, this is night and day. I love the hazy, classy atmosphere to this track. It almost has a lounge vibe to it. But it fits here. It has a place on this album, and it adds to this album's narrative. It's also oddly kaleidoscopic, almost even a little psychedelic in its own way. It's hard to describe, but it works, and I love it. And Kintsugi is another very meaty cut. It's over 6 minutes, but it's a very lush piano ballad once again, and it's really enjoyable. It's tender, it's heartfelt, it's just as visual and detail-oriented as other tracks here. It is so incredibly emotional. Like, I had a feeling that this would be a very vulnerable, very heartfelt album from Lana, but I did not expect this level. And her presence alone, I am so impressed by on this album. It's commendable. And by the end of this track, once again, there is a big glimmer of hope, and it's beautiful. While this isn't at the level of a Norman freaking Rockwell, or, in my personal opinion, Lust for Life, I do think it's pretty close, and this is a great album overall. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, the very long elephant in the room, if you will. This album is long. It is 16 tracks, well over an hour, and there are a few cuts on here that are so bad that just, it makes me wonder, like, why is it so long? There's obviously some fat to be trimmed here. Take, for example, the Judah Smith interlude. This track should have been left off, I feel like. It is so misguided to the point where it's just frustrating. And listen, I'm not saying that this isn't a strong message. It certainly is, but you have it playing out with Lana's ad-libs over it that it takes away from the message. This should have been left off. Fingertips, this is a really tough one for me. This has been a very intimate, sweet release from Lana, and a lot of it just feels very fresh, very rejuvenated. Then I hear this, and I'm telling you, it sounds like she wrote this track 50 times in the past. Even down to some of the smaller lyrical details, this sounds like a B-side from, like, I don't know, honeymoon era Lana. It just ends up sounding really dated just because of how much she's grown since then. But even on top of that, lyric-wise, as far as the songwriting goes, this is not her best moment, and this is most certainly not her best vocal performance either. And while I thought I escaped and that this album would end on a high note, it leaves actually two of the worst tracks for last. We have Peppers, which is easily the worst track here by quite a big margin. Ladies and gentlemen, we are lost when it comes to this track. I mean, this is by far the most hip-sounding track here, which I don't necessarily have a problem with. It also shows Lana coming out of her shell a little bit, which once again, I don't have an issue with. But this beat is dime a dozen. God, the cringeworthy lines, I can name like 12 of them. This is actually pretty nightmarish in my book. And Taco Truck, XVB, I mean, I don't know if it's just the length of this album, but by now, I'm just exhausted, and I feel like this track is Lana phoning it in. It's not nearly as classy or as intimate as a lot of the earlier tracks. I feel like this song doesn't know what it wants to be. Yeah, it's a letdown. And I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm certainly going to be in the minority here. I actually think that the second portion of this track, which brings in elements of Venice Bitch, is much more captivating, just not captivating enough. But I guess one of the good points about this being such a lengthy album is there's a lot of truly great material here, and I still think that Lana right now is bigger than she's ever been. Paris, Texas is one of the shorter tunes here. I really love the playful pianos that we get here. And her vocals in particular on this track are just so sweet and enchanting. It's really nice. It's one of the more straightforward tracks here, but at this point I actually welcome that and think it's actually pretty great. And I'm going to need to look at my notes here. I apologize, but grandfather, please stand on the shoulders of my father while he's deep sea fishing. Okay. As far as the deep cut goes, I think it's the best track here. Got from the mysterious atmosphere to her vocals, everything about this track just hits the spot. And I mean it, those vocals that we get on this track are some of the most spirited and passionate that we hear on this entire album. And it just keeps growing. By the end of it, it's one of the most epic sounding tracks here. I can't get enough of it. Then we get Let the Light In, featuring Father John Misty. This was one of the tracks that I couldn't wait to listen to, and it pays off. This is a really nice, rustic ballad. The breezy atmosphere and the acoustic strumming give this instrumental just enough of a slight differentiate from the rest of the album that just wakes me up a little. This big hook that we get here is so endearing. So much of this track is just classy, graceful as well. Like, it has an old school beauty to it that I just really love. And listen, if this album is not for you, if it's too long or you're just not into Lana's stuff, I get it, but I'm having a good time right now. Margaret, featuring Bleachers, is another track that I have been highly anticipating just because of how much Lana and Jack Antonoff have worked together in the past. And it's one of the more stripped down and direct tunes here, but I don't think that makes it a bad one. It is just as detailed. It is just as intimate. And as a track from, that's featuring Jack Antonoff, this is far from his usual style of music under the Bleachers name, but I think he pulls it off just because of how great chemistry the two have. And finally, honestly, Fishtail did take a little while to grow on me. But it's once again a great retrospective of Lana, a great, story of her past, a really great telling of how far she's come and grown. And the subtle beat that pops in is just the way to do it. It's not overly obnoxious, it's very classy. It's almost leaning in a trip-hop direction, and I think it's pretty tasteful. Also, some of the one-liners on this track are some of the most memorable of the entire album. So yes, this album was a long one, but this album is a long one. Can't wait to chat about that new Liturgy album in a couple of days. Oh dear, but for now, this new album from Lana Del Rey, it's legit. The hype is real. She has brought her songwriting chops. The performances are incredibly intimate on this thing, and I just love her poetic songwriting and just how far it's come. The detail-orientedness, the visual poetry that we get here is beautiful, and I don't think it's like as good as, for me, Lust for Life or Norman fucking Rockwell. That's just to be said. But as far as an album, after I was kind of worried with her when it came to Blue Banisters, I think this is a really great, reinvigorated album that has a ton to offer. And it's not going to be for everyone. This thing is long. This thing is 16 tracks, well over an hour. But if you're a fan of hers or you want to see what she's up to, check this out because there's so much great material to enjoy here. Is it her best? No, but for now, I'm definitely feeling a light 8 on this album, but let me know what you all think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, friends.